It's been almost 6 years since I covered the original Resident Evil 4 on the channel, and now with the awesome remake finally here, you may be wondering how do certain things work off camera. In this one we'll be doing the usual of looking for out of bounds secrets, taking a look at how the cutscenes work from different camera angles, how the enemies work off camera, and some amazing details you may not even know exist. I'll also be showing some viewer requests, and I've done my best to fit in as much as I can, but I have also got plans for another couple of videos that I'll cover some more specific areas in greater detail. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this one as we take a look at how does Resident Evil 4 Remake work off camera. The opening cinematic kicks off the story with a grisly tone as we watch one of the hikers get sacrificed by the Los Illuminados. However, when the axe strikes, the hiker's model isn't anywhere to be seen. In fact, most of the ritual stone table disappears too, though this doesn't stop it reappearing for a few frames before the scene finishes.
You have a strange sense of humour.
2005 was certainly a great year for video games, but possibly one of the most iconic game cutscenes from that era was Leon being transported to the village where his mission begins. If we lock the camera in one position for the scene, you may notice that most of the time the vehicle is moving along the same section of map. It just teleports back to the start position when the camera cuts to close-ups of Leon. I also like how the whole vehicle moves during the scene for the lighting and different shots, and we'll see a lot more of this in various cutscenes throughout the video. Oh, and by the way, just like in the original, the police officer does get out to take a leak. Also true to the original, you can't see his car.
Hey! ¿Hay alguien ahí?
Bruce, this is Condor 1.
Whilst inside the first house we speak to Hunnigan. Now, unlike throughout the rest of the game when Hunnigan appears on a small screen, in this instance we get a real-time sequence. But you may be wondering where Hunnigan is at this point. Well, if we zoom way out from the map, we can see what looks like a tiny cube hidden in the void below. This is the room Hunnigan is sat inside, and here we can find a note hidden off camera, which reads, "Pick up new glasses, get contact lenses." The other two notes aren't quite as interesting as they do appear on the results screen after completing the game. Everything else in here is hidden in the shadows and is particularly hard to see. Luckily we do have some tools at hand to help. Once the place is lit up, we can see that a lot of the items in here are duplicates, though there is one desk that has something on it that I found rather suspicious. What are these medicine bottles with a certain logo doing on this desk? Hidden in the dark, off camera. Very quickly, I just wanted to go out of bounds and show a full zoom out of the entire area that contains the village, the farm and the lake sections of map. Although most of it isn't loaded, the mountains in the background are, and you really get a sense of how small the playable map is compared with the backdrop and skydome. Whilst going out of bounds during some of the chapters, we can see this skydome, which we also found whilst looking out of bounds during Resident Evil Village. Thanks to the viewers who left comments on those videos stating that this was taken at Kensington Palace, London. So we just saw the lake monster Del Lago, which I believe quite literally means from the lake, appears under the boat shed just as we zoom into the villagers on the boat. Something else we can find hidden way below the lake is this strange room, and at first I had no idea what it was or why it was here, though incredibly it does turn out to make an appearance at various points throughout the game, without the player really knowing it is here. Drop a comment if you think you know what it is here for, and I'll show it a little later in the video. I won't dive too deep into what the monster does off camera too much because, as with some of the other main boss type enemies, if all works out I have got plans to go into more detail about those in a separate video coming soon. Crazy how this first El Gigante bangs on the back of the huge doors. Most games I've seen when a model is supposedly banging on the back of a door off camera, the model isn't animated like that at all. In fact, later in the video we'll see a totally different enemy who doesn't do this. Another thing about this beast is that it seems to have a filling in its tooth. I for one certainly wouldn't want to be the dentist who had to perform that task.
Pursue them. The lost lambs are escaping.
Perseguirles.
Deliver unto them salvation.
I mentioned earlier a hidden room underneath the lake. Well, here's what it's used for. During the scenes that we have flashes of Lord Sadler, as we've just seen inside the church, these are the scenes that are shot from inside this room. A scene that genuinely made me jump the first time it happened is also an interesting one to see from a different angle. When we meet the Chainsaw Sisters, if you do look closely for just a few frames, you can see them spawn into the scene in the default A pose.
Sorry, didn't realize that was yours.
I am flattered, but I'm a one-lady type of guy.
All right, come on.
Okay.
Towards the end of chapter 6 we get chased around the hillside by Chief Mendes. If he does happen to capture Ashley, then it's game over. I was interested to see where this happens and what he does after dropping below the camera. Initially I thought it took place in the first bend at the path where the fence is missing. I set up the camera and nothing. And it turns out that's because it takes place just after the first hut. And if we remove the mission failed screen after he jumps, we can see Ashley runs away. However, Mendes drops around 249 meters under the map. What the?
God, I thank you for your gift.
Just in case you wanted to see it, here is Mendes' false red eye falling out his head. I lost count of how many times I had to go through this battle just to get these shots, so I certainly hope you enjoy it. There is plenty to find out of bounds during the different chapters. The only problem is 95% of the time it's fairly boring objects such as assets or character models that are left over from different parts of the map. One of the more interesting out of bounds finds that I came across was this room that's below the castle. If you think you know where or what this room is used for, then I'd love to hear it. One of my favourite scenes to watch what's happening off camera is the tussle between Leon and Ada. It happens fairly quickly, but within the small amount of time you can see all sorts happening in the background, especially with the lighting effects.
Wouldn't make me use this, would you?
Well, after 6 years, that is one hell of a greeting. Ada.
You don't seem surprised. Interesting.
Try using knives next time. Better for close encounters.
Not a bad move.
You may need to watch this section a couple of times as there was a lot happening during this scene, but I did do my best to try and capture what was happening off camera to be able to show you. Just a few random curiosities now that you may have been wondering about, such as, is there anything on the screen during Ada's video call? Turns out there isn't. And I was quite surprised to find out there is a huge cavern underneath the ballroom, especially as it's fairly hard to see what's down here. I kind of expected it just to be some sort of blacked out texture halfway down and then nothing below it, but it is huge down here. Ever seen a Resident Evil chicken lay an egg? You have now. Something I was totally shocked by is as we walk through the laboratory, we get this first person view of what Verdugo is seeing as he runs above us. Now, you never actually see Verdugo at this point, and clearly that's because we don't need to. It's a first person view with a red filter on the camera, right? I mean, I wasn't even going to bother looking. But how wrong I was, and I'm glad I did look, because it actually turns out that Verdugo is always right behind the camera.
Aquí nos despedimos, señor Kennedy.
Is it always like this with you?
At the battle with the two El Gigantes, you can see from this angle how opening the pit too soon seems to reset the position of the giants. A viewer request that came in on Twitter was to take a look at the minecart scene. Now, I did take a look around most of the mines, and to be honest, from what I found, there wasn't a great deal to show that you can't see from the normal camera view, just a whole lot of rocks. Though what we can see is how up ahead the map loads just off camera before the cart reaches certain trigger points. The outside section to the mine was probably the most interesting, with the castle in the background, which looks awesome from down on the track, though more like a bit of a backdrop from a movie set once you look at it from above.
fun next time, eh, Sancho?
Whatever.
I'm just going to cover a few more viewer requests now, starting off with this one from Mark of the Wolves on Twitter. I'm sure other viewers out there are probably wondering the same. When does the knife in Luis's back appear?
Almost what?
Luis!
Seconder 1.
We mentioned earlier the calls that are made to Hunnigan, Ada and Luis that appear in the small display at the bottom of the screen. As far as I can tell, I'm pretty sure these are all pre-rendered clips. I'm also sure somebody else out there has probably already ripped the files and can confirm this. I just wanted to show a few curiosities and details about character models now. First of all, behind the merchant's mask, he does have a lower part to his nose, including nostrils, but anything below that is cut off. The chainsaw villager is pretty interesting, as he actually seems to have a full face under his sack, although it's as scarred and disfigured as the rest of his skin. His nose even seems to be cut away. I guess when you're waving a chainsaw around, accidents can happen. The Chainsaw Sisters also have skin under their bandages, and indeed the eye that is covered can be found hidden behind them too. One of my favourite models to look at was the Regenerator. These things always have the Los Plagas moving around inside them. Pretty cool to see close up like this. Of course, we can't move on without looking at Leon, and if we take a look inside his model, we can find a tiny colourful cube. I've no idea what the pattern is for. Normally these sorts of cubes are just a solid colour, though its function is more than likely to hold information about Leon, possibly his health or something like that. One other detail that I wanted to show about Leon is whilst aiming down a weapon, his hair disappears, and we're left with just the base texture, which looks, well, let's just say it's a little different to what we used to seeing Leon look like. Before we finish off Krauser, we pick up his knife, and at this point Leon looks into the knife and we can see his reflection. I was curious to find out how this had been done. By watching the scene from the opposite angle, it becomes a little clearer, as from this side we can see Leon's chin. Why? Well, this is a pretty neat bit of developer trickery, as I'm guessing what this is a pre-rendered video that's been wrapped around the knife blade. Hence why from the reverse angle, rather than the reflection of the floor, we can see Leon's chin and the rocks in the background. It's our very own hero Mike, and as he's flying overhead doing his thing and helping us out, even though we never see it, under his helmet he does have a head and a face, albeit at this point it's a little low poly. Though during the cutscene this changes to a more detailed model. One thing I did notice though is he doesn't seem to have any eyes, but he does have sealed eye sockets, which I don't believe any other character models usually have. Seems kinda strange not to just give him eyes. Maybe some of my regular viewers who are developers can come to the rescue and try and explain this one. You may remember some time ago I posted on the channel about an Easter egg of a mystery person that appears in the background looking over the crash scene. Many believe it's likely Shinji Mikami himself. Well, here we are nearly 5 years later with no official confirmation of that. But the crash scene has just happened, so I went to take a look around. However, unfortunately I could not find any reference to the mystery person Easter egg anywhere. In fact, I spent a long time looking throughout the whole time we spend on the island. Obviously I can't be 100% sure, as it could just be incredibly well hidden, or maybe it's just Capcom didn't get the memo yet and he or someone else might make another appearance in a future update. Coming towards the end now, an interesting scene to take a look at is when Leon is carrying Ashley to the lab to eradicate the bugs inside of them. As Leon walks closer to the lab, at set points there are triggers to change the look of the scene. If I slow this down to 10% play speed, you can see that there's a flash of light and a total whiteout of the screen. And at first I thought this would have been when we're teleported to a replica corridor with water inside it, though this is actually when the transformation in the same part of the map takes place. If you look closely, you can see it start to change just a few frames before the whiteout fully happens. Before we finish, just a quick look at Albert Wesker's eyes to see if he has those renowned cat's eyes. Unfortunately not, although they are a very cool shade of green. And finally, to finish off, whilst on the jet ski escaping the island before it explodes, I couldn't find too much out of bounds that you can't see whilst looking around on the jet ski, if you take your time and don't mind having to restart a few times of course. Something I did find interesting, however, is after the jump out of the cavern, we instantly teleport to a totally separate island located way over in the distance, which is where the final scenes take place. That is it for this one. I certainly hope you've enjoyed the video. Before I go, I do just want to give a big thank you to a few very talented people who I've sourced some of the tools from to create this video. First of all, Praydog and the team who create RE Framework, which is an incredibly handy set of tools. Franz Boehmer for his work on the camera used to capture some of the footage, and also the Relit tool with original Necoder. And special thanks to Alyssa from Deep Game Research for giving me pointers in the right directions to get some of these tools. Links to all these people can be found in the description. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.